How you doing? And welcome back to Objectively Biased with me, your host, the objective one, Steve Faulkner. And today's the roundtable discussion, and I have a sports enthusiast with me, my good friend Dave over here, and we'll be discussing why does society not want their athletes to be a part of social or political movements. That and more right now. All right. So first things first, why is it that society don't want their athletes being a part of social or political movements? Why don't they want our athletes to have a voice and an impact?
Well, it's kind of unfortunate, but I'd say probably the most important reason is that sports is fantasy. Sports is basically Harry Potter for people who don't read.
Okay.
They're not in it to hear about real issues. They're not here to discuss anything important. Especially when you look at football, you go through your work week Monday through Friday, you're busting your ass, and come Saturday and Sunday, you just want to sit down and watch a game, catch a college game, catch an NFL game, and you don't want to hear anything about any real issues occurring out there. And I think that is where people have their first barrier between watching sports and having the athletes who participate in these sports, who have now become massive celebrities, be active in real issues. I think ignoring the issues completely, that is a major barrier for them. They want to keep this a fantasy world.
But I agree with you 100%. But at the same token, isn't that then, are we not, as fans of these games, as fans of sports in general, separating the human aspect that these athletes are actually human beings? They're more than a name and a number on a jersey?
Oh, that's exactly what they're doing. I think that's kind of a legitimate issue why you get fans who lose their marbles about fantasy, who are sending hate mail and death threats to Maurice Jones-Drew for kneeling down on the one when he did that however many years ago. They're objects. They don't want them to be real people. And the second they become real people, that makes them, the fans, terrible people for how they're reacting to all of this. And they don't want to be faced with that truth.
But that's a severe problem that we have in society then at this point, if that's the issue. Now, you see the impact that it's had and how divisive we've had with Colin Kaepernick. With his situation, what he did and what he chose to do, and the way it's divided people in the country basically and divided the sports world. Is there anything to come of what Kaepernick has done and in I guess in regards to what guys like John Carlos and Tommy Smith did in the '68 Olympics and so on?
I think from a grander sports perspective, no. But pretty much every other sport is more progressive than football. You can do things in baseball and basketball and a lot of other sports that you can't do in football. There are plenty of people who protest things, who discuss legitimate issues, and are active socially that in other sports that's just not encouraged in football. You look at what happened with not Blair Walsh, my mistake. What happened with the punter from Minnesota, whose name I can't remember. I want to say Chris Cluey?
Might be.
Who just started discussing and getting active with issues with homosexuality and things regarding that, and was told by his coach, Leslie Frazier at the time, and the Minnesota Viking organization that he needs to stop talking about this.
Which
in what other sport?
Led to him getting cut.
Yeah, what other sport would that happen? That wouldn't happen in basketball. It probably wouldn't happen in baseball. So from a grander sports scheme, no. Football, he may have a big impact because we're seeing what's happening in the college game. We're seeing people doing the same thing that he did in college, in high school, in Pee-wee, and there will be repercussions of that down the line. You know, coaches like, I want to say Dabo Swinney, who is known for taking his team to church and expecting them to go to church. That's a very strange, very old way of doing things that you don't see in other sports. And I think you will see these coaches have to deal with more and more players that are going to come into the college game saying, no, I'm an individual. And when said individual is Julio Jones or Peyton Manning, they're going to have to let them be who they are because you want to win.
Well, if you're I'm glad you brought up the Pee-wee aspect and high school aspect, because we've seen this across the country where high school students have taken a knee and Pee-wee students have taken a knee, and all types of players. But we've also seen repercussions happen. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Pop Warner League in Texas where the entire team took a knee. And initially, the Pop Warner organization, was behind them. But because there was so much backlash towards it from other coaches, parents of players on other teams, that they eventually stepped back and they kind of balked at what they initially did and standing behind that Pop Warner team. And he turned around and said, well, no, you're going to have to forfeit the season if you're going to do this. And those kids opted to forfeit the season. If we see something like that continue to happen, is there not going to be a sense for some of these children to say, maybe I don't want to do this because it's going to hurt my chances to play the game, as opposed to standing up for something, a social issue that's a real issue? And could that affect them going forward, where you're saying, hey, maybe we're going to see some players come into the league where they're going to, have their own individuality. Maybe the punishment is going to strip away the individuality to keep it as militant, like you say, with football.
Well, football was already extremely militant. Individuality was already being stripped. Now we see it, or now it's being pointed out to these kids. So maybe they will take up a different sport. Maybe they will just bite the pill and go with it. But before, we were people, both the fans and the athletes, were blindly going with it and not realizing. Now someone has put a spotlight on it. And now there is, okay, so you have the backlash in Texas, but hopefully there will be a national backlash on Pop Warner for doing that. And again, we're still talking about Texas. Texas is the last place I expect any sort of movement forward to come from. Texas football is everything. And any sort of social or political issue will always come second to that. So let's work on places where we actually stand a chance.
Well, you also made this statement in regards to other leagues, other professional leagues being more progressive than the NFL. And one in particular that I see is the NBA, and how much further ahead they are than any of the other sports organizations in this country. And there wasn't major backlash with the Banana Boat crew. LeBron James, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, and what the stance they took when they took the stage at the ESPYs. How come there wasn't that backlash for what they did and the statements that they made publicly on a social issue that there's been with Kaepernick and other football players such as Arian Foster and Brandon Marshall, a linebacker from the Denver Broncos? How come that backlash has occurred in the sport of football and not so much in basketball?
I would say partially you have the act itself. What Colin Kaepernick did offended a bunch of people in ways that go way beyond sports. People do not, there are a lot of people who take not going with the national anthem or not, standing and looking towards the flag as somehow being a slap in the face to the military, as somehow being un-American, and that's pretty much, for a lot of people in this country, just unacceptable altogether. I disagree with that viewpoint, but that's still part of the difference. The other difference is we've already warmed up to basketball players being out there and being outspoken. They get the support of the NBA. When you look at, especially talking about upper management, I love Adam Silver. I love David Stern. I love the things that they did in the NBA and the way they've supported their players. On the flip side of things, you get Roger Goodell and all of the terrible people who were in the NFL before him, both from the commissioner side and the players' union side, they have always not stood behind the players, always encouraged them to just keep quiet and do their thing. And as a fan, I feel a lot of people get impacted by that when they see David Stern support LeBron James, support any of these other characters making decisions. It feels like, it's okay that they do this. When Roger Goodell turns around and says, no, you need to just play football and do this, that also sends a message. And so fans feel okay jumping on the other bandwagon, saying, no, you can't support this or do that or whatever. It's more ingrained societally that football players are just going to go and play football, and that's what they do.
All right. So now we got one last thing. Jason Whitlock. I got to address this. You know how much respect I have for him, as you do as well. Jason Whitlock had this to say in regards to the protests.
And these leagues are very good to black athletes. They need to be more appreciative. They need to protest at police headquarters, not at your place of work.
All right. Now, with that being said, what's your opinion on how he feels?
I feel like he's trying to squeeze this into a little box. Like, if you go to your work and decide to protest, you're wasting company time. Same as if I do. But they're actually being paid to sit there and sit through a bunch of ceremonies, go through a bunch of, basically a circus. So it's a very different situation. They're not wasting company time, first of all. The other issue is protesting a police station is not the same as making a statement on a national stage. And while many people will accuse Kaepernick of trying to be famous, that is a terrible way to try and get famous. He wanted to make a statement in a manner that would get out to as many people as possible. And that's what he did. The NFL does all kinds of awareness campaigns, and they make their own statements. This is not like being at your normal job and deciding, I'm going to go pick it out front and complain about cops shooting black people. It's a really weird thing to do at CVS.
Yes, I absolutely agree 100%. And with that being said, thank you for watching Objectively Biased. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Stephen Fogmeg. Follow me on Instagram at @S_Fogmeg and on Twitter at @SFogmeg. Again, thank you. Thank again my host, Dave. Appreciate you coming on.
It's nice being here. And you guys could follow me at nowhere. Don't go looking for me. You won't find me. I'm not there.
Once again, thank you for watching and enjoy.